This is a long video about Neil deGrasse Tyson, whatever his name is. What we're doing here is trying to show why it's legitimate as a critical thinker to criticize him. And here's where we begin. We begin with his education. He's a scientist, not a philosopher. But yet, when you see him on his podcast, you see him all over the place online. Even though he's supposed to be like the head of a planetarium, that's really his whole job. But he's become this liaison. And when you see him online, what you get is philosophy. You get him distracted by large philosophy questions, which is fair. He gets engaged with these questions and seems super engrossed within this dialectic that we call a big part of philosophy. And then he just regurgitates science. And so we're going to give you a little bit of evidence about that. And we're going to tell you about the debate between him and Terrence Howard and the result of that, because that's kind of the key. That story will reveal what he's really doing. And you will think going in, Terrence Howard is a Dunning-Kruger, and then you will leave with, wow, Neil deGrasse Tyson, what he needs to be doing is his job. So his job is a science educator. So his degrees were all in physics. And so even though he has a master's in the philosophy of physics, go look it up. I know you want me to be a researcher. I'm not. I'm a male dancer. What's important is he got a PhD from Columbia in cosmology, in cosmetology, and he doesn't deserve for me to pronounce anything right. This guy, okay, I'm going to go on with the video. So he's well educated in science, no education in philosophy other than probably personal interest in his own reading. If you know anything from my videos, you know you can only go so far outside of academia. I'm sorry. I had to do both, and I'm an asshole. Like, there's no reason for me to lie to you. You have to do academics, and you have to do the rebellion against academics in your own research before and after. And only then can you become a real person. Digressing. Seriously. Andrew Mike Tyson, whatever his name is a science educator, and that's it. He's not known for anything in cosmology, these little things that he's done, probably from his promoters trying to make it sound like he studied a little bit about Pluto and Uranus. One of those planets, not actually a planet. He's not doing anything in cosmology. He's doing something as a science educator. And not only is he doing something as a science educator or liaison between the scientific community and the public, not only is he doing that, he's the top one in the world. He's got the most power, the most visibility, the most access to this process, the job of translating from the scientific community to the general public. He's a teacher. I mean, I'm sorry to put it like that. That's what the reality is. He's supposed to be a teacher, and instead he's a demagogue. He is a promoter of scientism to such an extent that you could say in 2026, he's the leading scientific thinker on the planet. And I could cite podcast after podcast where he's calling philosophy useless, where he's saying it doesn't do anything except talk in circles, where science is the only way to get to answers, where he's agnostic about God, which is extremely unphilosophical. I mean, everyone believes that except me, but it's mistake after mistake after mistake. And if you have that much power, you're making that many mistakes, there's a place for criticism. And in this particular, that place is so big, it's bigger than my ego. So we're going to talk about some of the specifics, but the way to do that is to talk about Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard, amateur scientist and mathematician. He's also a super famous Hollywood actor. So he has power in a different realm. He reaches out to Neil, Mike Tyson as a mentor, as somebody he looks up to, as somebody he knows is the guy in the field, even though I'm not sure he is. But because he's such a public figure and has so much access, Terrence Howard looks at him in an ideal light, sends him a paper on reinvention of mathematics, which turns into, I'm probably not getting all this right, go do your own research. The crux of the paper in no small way was that a lot of famous scientists have been overlooked. So they were talented geniuses that got overlooked by big science or by the science language game. He wouldn't put it that way. Obviously, he's not a philosopher. But Terrence Howard makes a little point, but he also seems manic and entitled and a little nuts, which everyone is in the United States. And Terrence Howard probably has a lot of time on his hands. Probably not making a lot of movies. This was in 2024. June of 2024 was when this really transpired. And he sent the paper to Tyson. And what Tyson does, Tyson writes in a lengthy commentary on the paper, which means he redlines it like a scientist would. So instead of treating Terrence Howard as a student, instead of identifying that Terrence Howard was reaching out to him as a student, he does what he always does, which is make a statement within the scientism language game about how important it is to peer review other scientists and set an example, and in no small way, like academics do, make yourself look smart, which is why philosophy is gone, but also why science has become ridiculous. So he epitomizes this mistake by reacting to Terrence Howard by claiming he makes a 17-minute response video after he gets in trouble. Like, he's always in trouble. Tyson is always in trouble. I'm not even going to go into the conduct allegations because I've read all four of them. One was serious, the other three are jokes, and I don't care. And I do think he embroils himself in these things because he's irrational and irresponsible and socially awkward and is extending his job to include things that have nothing to do with his expertise. That's what I think, and that's what I think this shows. He responded to Terrence Howard as if Terrence Howard was a professional scientist, looked down on him. He knew that he didn't know. Everyone else knew. Anyone else that had read the response that Tyson gave would have known that he was insulting him and acting like an entitled college professor. Because I was in college, I can tell you, I experience these teachers. You have to learn to do it. You have to grow as a teacher. And he's an educator. He's a world renowned science educator, the number one, and probably has zero skills in educating. And this Terrence Howard thing is a perfect example. That's why I'm bringing it up. But he misidentifies Howard or is irresponsible about that identification to the extent that he writes a scientific rebuttal with all of these insulting comments about how Terrence Howard is a Dunning-Kruger, which he is, and how Terrence Howard is leaping to arguments, which is what they said about me in philosophy, by the way, which is true. Terrence Howard is not a professional scientist or philosopher of science. I'm not sure anywhere in there he claims to be, but he did say I'm reinventing mathematics, which is a huge Dunning-Kruger statement, set um, uh, Tyson off. But Tyson should know better and doesn't. For the same reason he says stupid shit like like discipline of philosophy is useless to science, which might be the single dumbest statement I've ever heard. And I've heard a lot of dumb statements. Being in the dating world for 30 years, you can imagine how many dumb things I've heard because I blame everything on them. I'm perfect. But that statement undermines the entire movement of intellectual achievement. And in particular, the idea that we need to reinvent a philosophy from the 18th century that got people involved. Social philosophy is the only way to go. It's the only way to draw people in. It's the only way to change what most people see as the number one problem, which is everyone's dumb. So did Neil deGrasse Tyson do that? No, he did the opposite. He failed as an educator. He failed as a liaison between the scientific community and the public. And he takes it out on a famous actor, which was a big mistake. That's why he caught so much shit on the Joe Rogan show. Joe Rogan and Terrence Howard laughed about this shit for I don't know how long. And then Tyson embarrasses himself further, miscalculates again, puts out a 17-minute response video where he didn't apologize at all and justified his behavior within a scientific framework, which is not where it should have been. It should have been in purely educational framework. I'm gonna make more videos about this. I've got to end this one because I've got to upload it and it can't be take forever. But the conclusion is that he has enough power and he, by definition, then has so much responsibility that he needs to be a better critical thinker. He's not. He's just a dude curious about philosophy that's manipulating his power within the scientific community as an educator to demonstrate that power, which ends up being scientism, ends up being a misappropriation of the relationship between science and philosophy, between subjectivity and objectivity, which I've said a million times. Super easy to understand what scientism is. Look it up, become familiar with the fact that it is a movement, it is a thing where ultimately what bubbles up within social philosophy in the communities and the language games in general is that philosophy is useless. And that's literally what he said. So this isn't me proving anything at this point. This is me just basically laying out what he did, and he proves it himself. So the online critique of Tyson's pretty simple. He came up with this thing called hashtag rationalia. I don't even know why it's called that, quote unquote. It basically means that the best kind of civilization, a particular civilization based on the weight of evidence, would be some ideal situation. And he was lambasted, obviously, by philosophers. The other one is the dismissing philosophy thing we already brought up, useless to science. and then his particular scientific absolutism, which you hear in every one of his arguments. And that is, of course, this extension of positivism that I'm sure he isn't even familiar with, but it's because it's a reflexive language game where people believe science is the answer to everything. That was positivism in philosophy that's now debunked and laughed at. So I don't think he understands any of this. I'm sorry. Maybe he needs to call me. I can set him straight because I'm not going to put up the shit that a lot of these other people are putting up with online, where he calls them and he tells them things like there is no such thing as belief. Come on, bro. Just stop. Anyway, that's a video. Send me a bill.